Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Greg's 14 Adventures. So, Greg's 14 Adventures began after my second time playing through a Realm Reborn, and so they're vlogs about basically everything post the ending of a Realm Reborn, but there's not really anything that covers a Realm Reborn itself in Greg's 14 Adventures. When I did my Final Fantasy ranking series a couple years ago, that was based upon my experience playing a Realm Reborn. And so where 14 landed in those rankings was based upon just playing a Realm Reborn and nothing past that. And so obviously my opinion of the game has changed after having beaten Heaven's Word and Stormblood. And so I thought it would be fun to revisit this ranking series and watch the 14 segments and cringe at my bad opinions and praise myself for the good opinions. I thought this would be a fun compilation to go through, reacting to myself and seeing, how I thought about the game back then and how I feel about it now. So we're going to go through the different segments and see where 14 ended up in my rankings. And if I have commentary, I will give commentary. So it's like somewhere between a supercut and a reaction. So let's start with the introduction to the ranking series, where I talk about this entire concept. Once it loads. Hi Internet, welcome to the Gred Troyan YouTube channel. I'm Gred Troyan and I love Final Fantasy. I've been a fan of the series ever since I was a little kid. I started playing the games when I was 7 years old, way back in 1997. Around age 16 or so, I stopped playing video games and went on a JoJo-esque bizarre adventure of traveling and performing in a flamboyant theatrical rock band that could best be described as hair metal meets shonen anime. And turns out when you're doing 60 plus gigs a year, you don't get as much time for grinding out JRPGs. However, retiring from music and focusing on a career as an aspiring writer allowed for more time at home, which meant more time for RPGs, baby. In addition, I introduced my wife to the JRPG genre, and she happened to fall in love with them too. The fact that playing RPGs was able to count as wife bonding time was a big factor in getting me back into the genre and finally completing a big portion of my backlog. Long story short, in 2022 I was able to finally say that I had beaten all of the mainline Final Fantasy games, including the MMOs. A lot of folks skip 11 and 14, but not me, baby. I did it. With 16 coming out, I thought it would be fun to do a ranking video about the series. But instead of just one video, I thought it would be cooler to do 16 ranking videos in honor of Final Fantasy XVI. I'll be ranking the games in a number of different categories, including story, music, combat, and a whole lot more. And I'll be releasing them one per day. 16 videos, 16 rankings. Let's establish a few ground rules first. Only mainline entries are being considered here. No spin-offs. Okay, well, I lied. I'm including tactics because every time someone does a ranking list and doesn't include tactics, me and everyone else in the comment section is bummed. So tactics will get a spot. In regards to the MMOs, their rankings will be judged by the base game only, except in specialized categories that will make sense when we get to them. The way I look at the MMOs, the base game, aka the Nation missions in Final Fantasy XI, and A Realm Reborn in Final Fantasy XIV are the game. And I treat the expansion packs and add-ons in the MMOs like sequels. So while most of the rankings won't factor in quote-unquote sequels, I will consider remakes of the games in terms of my overall assessment. So the 3D ports of Final Fantasy III and IV, for example, can be used to factor in my ranking for a number of categories, but Final Fantasy IV The After Years would not be allowed for consideration unless the category specifically warrants such. I know what you're thinking, 14 fans. Yes, the best content in the MMOs comes from the expansion packs, but if I were to count Endwalker and Change of Promathia, I'd want to count the After Years and 13 too. And these videos will be complicated enough as it is. Don't worry, there are certain categories where the MMOs will clean house, so chill out 14 fans, it's all gonna be fine. So, I still hold this opinion to a degree where I think if you're someone who wants to say, I have beaten every Final Fantasy game, and you beat the Nation missions in 11 and A Realm Reborn in Final Fantasy 14, I will actually count that as you haven't beaten every Final Fantasy game. Because I do treat expansions like sequels, essentially. Sequels or really, really expansive DLC where your stats carry over and the story continues. But I would say you hit end credits. 11 doesn't have end credits until Rhapsodies, but I'm going to say if it was at one point that was the end of the game and there was a final boss and you beat it, I'm going to count that as having beaten the game. I'm going to count the rest as sequels. Sequels that are better, that make the story feel more complete. Sequels that are the best part of that little sub-series
but I'm still on that opinion. However, if someone wanted to, like, when they're factoring their rankings of, let's say, I'm ranking every Final Fantasy game, and I want to factor in all of 11, not just the base game, and all of 14, not just the base game, I think that is also fair. I do think it is unfair if someone says, I'm going to factor in all of 14 and just the base game of 11, or just 11 up to Chains of Pamathia, which I know a lot of people do. But yeah, overall, I'm still fine with this. And this was back when I was recording with that really crappy headset mic from work. So actually, these ranking videos, and especially that Final Fantasy 11 video essay that I did, basically paid for this nicer microphone that you hear now. The ad revenue paid for a nice microphone. So thank you, ad revenue, for allowing me to not sound this terrible.
And for the sake of full transparency, I have beaten all of the expansions and add-ons in Final Fantasy XI, but I've only beaten A Realm Reborn in Final Fantasy XIV, though I did watch the cutscenes for 1.0. I do plan on going back and finishing the rest of 14, but I probably wouldn't be able to do that and get these videos out before 16 comes out.
I mean, yeah, that was basically cope. It was basically, I realized I'd beaten all the mainline games, and I've beaten all of 11. If I try to beat all of 14 in time to make this, this, 16, video essays, I would not have had time to do that and get the video essays out before Final Fantasy 16. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. Close enough for rock and roll.
These videos take longer to make than you might think, and I'm not a professional YouTuber or a guy who plans on being a professional YouTuber. I do plan on going back to 14 after I finish my FOMO list of mobile games that I think are kinda cool, but I don't trust their longevity of availability. So after I finish the last 2 seasons of Brave Exvius, the content after Chapter 26 in Another Eden, and beat Final Fantasy Dimensions 1 and 2, then I'll go back to 14. Oh, and I'm working 2 jobs, actively shopping my writing around and working on new projects. This year I've already written a script for an indie RPG, which, when that comes out, I will make an announcement. Got a new screenplay copyright for an animated feature film, and I'm hard at work at writing a novel. I'm also doing reaction/review videos of every single Thin Lizzy song on this channel. They're really cool, trust me. So yeah, I keep myself busy. The rest of 14 will happen, but I felt it was good to be upfront about that and the other stuff on my to-do list, preventing me from jumping on that immediately. And as far as the rankings themselves go, well, rankings are fluid. You feel one thing one day and feel something different the next. So these rankings are how I feel about the games at this point in time. Opinions can change, but this is a snapshot of how I view the games at this point in my life and my thoughts on them. Alright, well, that's enough jabbering. Just wanted to give you guys an idea of what to expect. I'm looking forward to the raucous discussion in the comments of these videos. Thanks for listening to my intro, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Okay, so let's move on to the next video in the series, which is ranking the Final Fantasy games by story. So let's press pause. Where did 14 end up? In the number 14 spot, above Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 11. So let's see what my assessment was on A Realm Reborn story a couple years ago.
Number 14, Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Okay, hold on, Final Fantasy XIV fans. Put down your pitchforks. Remember, this is a ranking of the base game's story only. Since the original version of 14 is unplayable these days, that means that A Realm Reborn is now the base game. While I have watched the cutscenes for 1.0, my ranking is not going to factor that in. Spoiler alert, 1.0 is boring.
This is the comment that I'm going to take back. I appreciate 1.0 for the story it was trying to tell back then. I think there were some really cool elements that got lost in between 1.0 and the rest of the game. Like, I think the Path Companion was really, really cool and a great way to, like, personalize the story a bit more for the players. I thought that was really awesome. I thought some of the, like, the motion capture was really good. The directing was really good. I think that the way the echo worked in 1.0 was very interesting. So I think the Hildebrand stuff in 1.0 was good. So yeah, there was a lot of good stuff in 1.0 that, unfortunately is kind of just lost to time unless you're, willing to watch it on YouTube, which, a lot of people aren't willing to watch cutscenes from a video game they'll never play. Like me, I've done that plenty of times. I've watched cutscenes for video games that, I hadn't played yet. And then, at a certain point I went on to play, like I watched cutscenes for 15 and 11 before I played them, and 16. So, but I know a lot of people, just have there's the reputation of, 1.0 being bad, and they're just like, oh, whatever, I'll just play Realm Reborn. So, but 1.0, a lot better on the second go around. And I would say I like 1.0 now, at least in terms of story.
Based only on A Realm Reborn, Final Fantasy XIV ends up in the number 14 spot, which wasn't on purpose, but it's pretty fun now that I think about it. A Realm Reborn had the Herculean task of being both a sequel to the failed Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 and also a soft reboot, so newcomers could appreciate it without experiencing the original game. It's impressive that the writers were able to pull it off, and I commend them for that. However, the story of A Realm Reborn didn't really grab me all that much compared to other entries in the series. Like Final Fantasy XI, the world of Final Fantasy XIV is full of adventurer mercenaries. 5 years ago, the Garlean Empire brought down the Blood Moon Dalmund from the heavens in an attempt to destroy an alliance of nations that dared stand against its power. And while they were ultimately stopped, there was great devastation across the land. Now that the world has begun its recovery, the Empire's threat continues to rise alongside the threat of beastmen summoning their primal gods. And it's up to one adventurer, who also happens to be the Warrior of Light, to save the day. Along the way, he teams up with a society of heroes known as the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, and together, they bring a new era of light to the land.
I mean, I probably should have been gender neutral there, but I just wasn't thinking that much. So, yeah, I should have gone gender neutral.
Right off the bat, there's way more to chew on than the previous two base games on the list. However, I didn't really fall in love with any of the characters, and a lot of the narrative felt like a slog to get through. There's an entire arc about gathering ingredients from around the world to throw a party for yourself at the beach. The ridiculous filler ended up breaking my disbelief for the story pretty heavily, and for a series as ridiculous as Final Fantasy, that's kinda incredible, and in a way, I respect the game for that.
I mean, in retrospect, this quest set you up for so much of the stupidity that 14 continues to do. So, I now look back at this quest fondly because it's so stupid, and then there's like stuff like that in every expansion. So, you know what? I'm gonna say it's a great quest. Or I just have Stockholm syndrome after playing so much 14, whichever you're more inclined to believe. But I will say that based on A Realm Reborn, just A Realm Reborn, and, maybe 1.0 cutscenes, the characters like the Scions, you don't get too attached to them based on A Realm Reborn, and the expansions do flesh them out a bit. Like, Alphinaud really is maybe like the closest you get to like a strong character connection in A Realm Reborn. Maybe Thancred. I'd say, Thancred too. Especially if you go the older route. I think Thancred you get a good amount of. Y'shtola and even Eden Papalimo, even if you go with their city-state routes, you don't get as much. But I think if you go Thancred, which feels like the canonical route, you do get decent development for him and Alphinaud, and they do come across as endearing party members in A Realm Reborn proper. So, I could have been, maybe I'm a little bit harsh here, but I can see how someone can look at them and be just like, they're all right. I can see that.
However, it happens a lot more in this game than you'd think, and the Fetch Quest nature of the story made the plot feel really bloated. A Realm Reborn was a lot darker of a story than what I expected, which isn't a good or a bad thing, but rather just an observation. And while I like the overall story content of 11's expansions far more than anything I played in 14 up to this point, hashtag Hot Take Troyan, I have to acknowledge that if we're doing a side-by-side comparison of 11's base story versus A Realm Reborn, 14 absolutely crushes 11 in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I actually enjoyed playing base 11 more than playing base 14. Like, just the vibes were more there for me. But yeah, I actually kind of agree with that assessment. If you look at just A Realm Reborn by itself, I think it's kind of fair to rank that lower in the mainline Final Fantasy stories. Like, it's not bad. I don't think there's any like out and out bad mainline Final Fantasy stories, but I would put this more towards the bottom. So yeah, I actually kind of still agree with this. All right, now let's go over to the music category. Now this was...
And for those who care, my preferred version of...
We'll get to that later. So where did we rank this in the music category? This ended up, where is that? Oh, number 15. So like second from the bottom. All right, let's check it out.
Number 15, Final Fantasy XIV. Again, the ranking of these soundtracks are not factored into the expansions, so this is where the OST for A Realm Reborn ends up. Like Final Fantasy XII, the feel of the soundtrack feels closer to film score music than traditional Final Fantasy music, but unlike 12, the music here is generally pretty memorable. For starters, there's an actual battle theme, and it's pretty decent, so it has that over 12.
I think I've become a real 14 player at this point because I'm just looking at my screen layout and going, what the hell is he doing with that screen layout? Oh my goodness. That I think I've become a real one. Oh my god. Yeah, just I think what I did was like I tried to just move stuff around on my screen because I hated all the clutter of 14's screen layout. So when I went into the UI, I tend to just like move stuff down to try to hide it. And so it ended up just being this ugly mess. Yeah. But I think what I was trying to articulate with this section is that I think that Soken has a very good, catchy melodic style, but it is a melodic style I like less than other composers in the series. So he's doing the kind of music I would actually want for a Final Fantasy in terms of like, I want the melodies to be just like stupidly catchy. That is actually like the correct approach. But I think there's more of like a bittersweetness to the melodies of, let's say, like Yoko Shimomura, obviously Uematsu, you know, why am Mizuta? I was blanking on Mizuta's name and I felt like a terrible person for that. But there's the more like this layer of like Japanese bittersweetness to their melodies. Like the Japanese folk music and Irish folk music have this like tinge of bittersweetness in like the melodic patterns that they tend to use. And his music, Soken's music, has less of that bittersweet Japanese quality to it. In like broad strokes. That's not to say that doesn't ever happen. The same broad strokes. And so I love the music of 14. And I think it's very good. And as I get through more and more expansions, my opinion of 14's music is rising. But I think because a lot of 14's music has more of like that grand John Williams-y like film score vibe to it, rather than that Japanese bittersweetness mixed with like progressive rock from the 70s because Nobuo is a nerd. Like, I'm missing that aspect to it. And so like it's just Soken's is, coming at it from a different perspective that is still very good, but I just prefer other perspectives to music better. So it's like, I think the comparison I would make is like, almost like Kiss and Thin Lizzy. They're both 70s classic rock bands, and they're both doing stuff I think is very good. And, Thin Lizzy, they've got that bittersweet Irish influence in their music, and Kiss has got that more like American, American, like, 60s bubblegum pop influence. And so whichever one you prefer musically in terms of like the melodic patterns that they bring will affect how you feel about them overall. So, but I mean, it's still good. The thing is like, the only one that's an easy last place ranking the Final Fantasy soundtracks is 12. Like 12 is easily last place. And then everything else is like, yeah, it's good. It's kind of tough after that point. Like there's a big jump between 12 and the rest of the series.
But even beyond something so simple, I can safely say I love a lot of the music in this game. The swashbuckling theme of Limsa Lominsa is perfect. The music for Ul'dah captures the grandeur of their ruthless capitalism. And then there's Gridania, which sounds like music perfectly suited for the Shire. There's plenty of great music in 14, but it's also not necessarily the musical style I prefer in Final Fantasy OSTs. Soken's style is very different than Uematsu's, who is generally the standard bearer for what I expect and want from Final Fantasy OSTs. But different doesn't necessarily equal bad. While a Realm Reborn soundtrack may stand out in the grand scheme of the series, it fits the game incredibly well. And of course, I do need to mention that Uematsu actually wrote the majority of the soundtrack for the original version of Final Fantasy XIV, but since that version of the game no longer exists, it's not the version of the soundtrack most considered to be canon at this point. 1.0 had a lot of great music, and while some of that carried over to A Realm Reborn, most of the ARR tracks are Soken's, and very much in his composition style. I wouldn't call the score for A Realm Reborn bad by any stretch of the imagination, and while I do like it quite a bit, I simply like most of the OSTs in the series more than A Realm Reborn soundtrack.
Yeah, I think I'm still in that position. So the thing is, like, it's really great. And when I say it stands out in the series, I mean it's just sort of a lot of the melodic patterns are just a little bit different than, what Shimomura or Mizuta and Uematsu did. But then honestly, like, the score of 13 does stand out in the series too. There's obviously some crossover with 10. So I think I was trying too hard to highlight the differences in the soundtrack. But like, it does fit into the series pretty well. It's just, I think the very minor nuances of composition style was, just what made me decide, I like it just a little bit less than this style. But I mean, they're very, very close. And the same way that, like, someone who's not into hair metal can't really tell the difference between Rat and Motley Crue, and they're like, this is basically the same shit. That's kind of how it is with, like, Soken versus Uematsu. Like, they are different, and people who are real connoisseurs of, game OSTs can, like, get into the intricacies of the differences. But, like, if you're, like, not an RPG fan, you're just like, yeah, this just sounds like RPG music. What's the issue? So, it was just me over intellectualizing, the preferences. All right. But, is that ranked too low? Oh, I mean, I put 11 just one spot above it. I would say now, if I'm moving, like, factoring all the expansion stuff I've heard right now, I'll put above Tactics, but I won't put above 15. So I'll put above Tactics, But 11 would leapfrog to like above maybe Final Fantasy X, honestly. 11 I would put above Final Fantasy X if I'm leapfrogging. Let's see how I felt about 14's combat back in the day. So
Number 15, Final Fantasy XIV. I'm generally not an MMO player. I don't even consider myself much of a gamer in general. I like video games and I've been in a lot of JRPGs, but I'm not one of those guys who really gets into the intricacies of mechanics in games I enjoy.
So this is me basically prefacing by saying, I am a fake nerd girl, don't at me.
I'm a casual and I'm probably playing Final Fantasy XIV wrong and missing a lot of depth in the combat mechanics. Before Final Fantasy XIV, my only MMO experience was RuneScape, so I never played WoW and don't have the gameplay shorthand that many other players do. So, take this opinion as the perspective of someone who loves Final Fantasy games, but is generally an outsider to the MMO genre and their mechanics. I don't like how combat in 14 forces you into the role of either DPS, tank, or healer. The way I play most Final Fantasy games is preferring hybrid red mage character types, jack of all trades who can do a little bit of everything based on the situation. While there is a red mage in Final Fantasy XIV, they squarely fall into the DPS class, and that's the role they have to play. I only played up to the end of A Realm Reborn, and I found 14's combat to be extremely restrictive and unsatisfying. I started off as a gladiator before deciding that I hated being a tank, and switched over to pugilist before upgrading to monk, which I did like a lot better. Since I was playing as myself, and I used to get in a lot of fistfights as a kid, did martial arts, and have a love of shonen fighting anime, I appreciated just going around beating ass, and it did feel very me. However, the cooldown system and cycling between combos felt very repetitive. It does feel much more engaging than 12, and the range of movement is actually something you can use to a tactical advantage in combat, which is something I appreciate. The animations are nice when you're playing solo, and it's great to have real honest-to-goodness battle music when you fight. Group content, however, has its issues. The screen becomes a chaotic mess when a bunch of players are pulling off their flashiest moves all at the same time, making it hard to navigate the combat area. There's an option to turn this off, but I didn't find out about it until long after I got through A Realm Reborn. But again, I don't like being forced into the rigid roles for each dungeon and raid, and the actual mechanics of fighting don't feel super good to me. It does have more than one fun battle, which does give it the edge over 12, but
I was very harsh to a 12 in so many of these rankings. Oh my goodness. People think I hate 12 and I don't. But honestly, if you thought I hated 12 from watching these videos, I think that's actually kind of fair. I was pretty brutal to 12 in some of these rankings. Like in this, 12 ranked last place. As far as the combat goes, I like 14's style of combat now. I don't know if I would rank it any higher still though. After going through all the mainline games, I think I would put it in the same spot. And just above 12. I don't know where 16 ends up in this. But I mean, honestly, I do prefer like traditional turn-based and ATB to this, which is most of the series. I prefer 11's combat. 15 is I prefer 15's as like it's not really like engaging necessarily, but it has a lot of that cool factor of just like Warp Strike is cool and I'm a simple monkey man. And even though I can kind of do something similar to Warp Strike with the different job classes, I would still actually put 14's combat towards the bottom, despite like actually understanding it to a much better degree and actually enjoying it now, whereas the combat was just like a barrier to me getting through the stuff I wanted to see, see the story. Part of it is finding a job class that I liked. Every time I log in with Gred Troyan, because Monk feels like his canonical job class, I don't like playing as much, so I might actually switch to Red Mage with Gred Troyan also, and just do that when playing with Summoner Jova once a week, because, I don't like, I'm very particular. I like Red Mage, and I haven't really liked any other job class I played in 14. So that could be part of it, is the job class specifics. Someone made a snarky comment in this video where they said, like, the reason you don't like the combat is because you're not even doing your rotations. So, actually, I think the combat is better than I'm giving it credit for, but I would actually still rank it, towards the bottom of the series.
Other than passing that extremely low bar, it doesn't do much for me. The game probably gets better later on, but based on my experience solely on A Realm Reborn, it easily ranks towards the bottom of my list when it comes to combat.
Yeah, yes. I think it's a lot better than I gave it credit for, but I would still rank it towards the bottom. Yeah, that's true. All right. Now let's move on to fun factor. Where did I rank the game just based upon just like pure enjoyment? Also towards the bottom in the number 14 spot.
Number 14, Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV is one of my favorite Final Fantasy games to just hang out in. It's nice to log in, go to a cool location, and just kinda chill. There are some wonderful locations and great environments to explore in 14. I always enjoy the limited time seasonal and special events. There are plenty of fun minigames at the Gold Saucer to keep you occupied, and there's so many little elements of charm and fun intertwined into the game. I like the NPC in the Gold Saucer who talks about how great it feels to take a dip in the fountain, and when you do it blasts you high up in the air. Stuff like that is really great. But there's a lot of stuff I really don't like about 14. First off, I really hate the UI. I find it to be a cluttered mess and not very intuitive. Even after customization, I've still never been satisfied with the look.
I still, after all this time, don't necessarily like 14's UI. I do think it is too cluttered. But like you do need a lot of it. So, but that's just like the way the game was designed. So yeah, I still don't like 14's UI, and I would still rank 14's UI. Actually, if I was ranking UI, 14 is easily last place in the series for me. Even as much as 12 like annoys me in a lot of ways, at least the UI is clean. 14's UI is a mess. Real talk.
I really don't like waiting in queues to do mandatory story content. I've got a fairly busy schedule, and so waiting for 20 minutes to progress the story is super frustrating as a guy who mainly plays single-player games and likes to control the pace of my progress. At those points, my progress is completely out of my control, and I'm never like, yay, I get to wait to play the game now.
So this fits to a degree with the trust system in like a lot of dungeons. And especially for A Realm Reborn. At the time I beat A Realm Reborn, there were not trusts for A Realm Reborn. So that does add a different dynamic. But you can't do trials with trusts, and you can't do raids with trusts. And given that the Crystal Tower raids are a requirement for the story, and there are a lot of trials that are requirements, that is a pretty significant barrier to playing the game. And I still think that is a valid thing to feel frustrated about, especially depending on like your schedule. Because me, I usually play 14 in the mornings before work. So we're talking like, 5, 6 a.m. or whatever. And there's not many people on at that time because, most people aren't psychos like me. And so because of that, if I want to do that kind of content, that is usually a brick wall. That means like, okay, I have to find some time in the afternoon to play this, which I usually don't have as much time for. And it's a lot harder to fit that in. So, yeah, I think that is a valid criticism of something that does detract from the fun of Final Fantasy XIV.
I also had a really bad experience with the final boss of A Realm Reborn. It was my first time doing the raid, and I didn't fully understand the mechanics, so I got left pretty far behind.
First off, actually, it's not a raid, it's a dungeon.
I ended up missing the first stage of the boss battle because I couldn't proceed, and when we got to the next stage of the boss, I wiped immediately and waited for the other players to kill the boss. Then I got to watch the ending. Roll credits. How satisfying.
I mean, on the one hand, like, healer could have rezzed me. That would have been nice, so I could have participated. That would have been cool. On the other hand, you know what? Okay, there's two things. Greg, you should have gotten good. That's one. Two, they could have done a better job of, like, holding your hand with what you need to do. I think I got, like, lost on where to go with, like, the Magitech armor or something. And, like, the text on the screen was really small, so I didn't see it. And I just didn't know that I was supposed to, like, activate it or whatever. So I think 14 could do a better job with holding your hand or just, like, making the text bigger of, like, hey, go do this thing. I think that would be something that 14 could do better in general, of just like putting bigger text on the screen of what you're supposed to do, which I did notice. I think they started doing that more in the expansions, like go and protect this person immediately in this solo duty. So I think they've done a better job with that. But yeah, I will say that things like that do lower the enjoyment. But I think that's just the nature of like an MMO. Like if you're the one who wipes and the rest of your party beats the boss, you will just get less satisfaction in general. So that's just like part of the nature of MMOs, I guess.
Kill the boss. Then I got to watch the ending. Roll credits. How satisfying. What's more, I don't like feeling rushed when viewing cutscenes and dungeons because of the pressure of keeping pace with other players who just want their level bonuses. That's not to say the community of 14 isn't great. Everybody is super kind, courteous, and respectful. It's also really fun to explore player design content like the housing districts. The good nature of the community, great music, and general appeal of the world help the game a lot. But there are a lot of things I flat out just don't like about 14, and they're core to the experience of the game. One final thing I want to say before I move on is a direct address to the folks who say that you need to play through 40 plus hours of A Realm Reborn before the game starts to get good. I've noticed a lot of you are also the same folks who say playing through 20 hours of 13 before the game gets good is an unreasonable ask. I personally find both games fun, and we'll get to 13 when we get to it, but it's important to acknowledge that it's a definite flaw in 14's design that you can play for over 40 hours before you get to the quote-unquote good parts. Again, I don't dislike 14. I actually like it quite a bit, but I think it's important to truthfully acknowledge the game's flaws. Number 3.
I thought I'd be arguing to pass Greg more, but honestly, like, I was kind of cooking there in real talk. I think that a lot of that criticism is fair. However, I think that in the expansions, they did a better job. Like, when I was talking about the dungeons and the cutscenes in the middle of dungeons, they did a better job of making the cutscenes be a thing after the dungeons. So you're not like interrupting a dungeon for a cutscene. I think they did a better job figuring out the way to tell stories while still having the dungeon aspect of the gameplay. So I think they figured it out. And that was something that's sort of like an awkward relic in A Realm Reborn, that they figured out how to tell stories better with their mechanics and cutscenes and all that going forward. So, but I think the game is a lot more fun than I give it credit for. A lot more fun. I think that is kind of too low. And so if I'm, moving this ranking around, I'd probably move it to above Final Fantasy VI, but below Final Fantasy XI is where I'd move it now. So that would be Final Fantasy XI is in 9th place, so it would be in the top 10. And I'd probably put it above 16 in terms of fun factor, because 16 is just like, I enjoyed the game, but the world's like a bleak, nightmarish hellhole that I don't want to hang out in. So yeah, I'll put 14 above 16. All right, let's see. Ranking based upon world.
Hi, Internet. Would be number 3, Final Fantasy XIV. Alright, so basically everything I said about Vana'diel applies to Eorzea. I will admit to not have
Okay, so I say Eorzea in this section a lot, but I meant Hydaelyn, but I didn't know because I was a noob, so don't at me.
haven't played anything past A Realm Reborn, but I've read about locations in the other expansions, and like 11, the additions to 14's world only adds to the immersive feel of the world. Nothing feels out of place or awkward, and everything in 14's world builds on top of each other to create a realm that feels truly alive. The culture, politics, and geography all feels like a very real world, and the lore is incredibly enriching. The fact that the devs were able to tie in the destruction of 1.0 into the world building of the game is an incredible stroke of genius. I have 14 pretty low in a number of categories on this list, so I wanted to throw it a bone because I don't feel it's bad at all, and this is a category where the game truly does impress me. It's possible that I might rank it lower than 11 after consuming all the expansions, but even with just reading about Ulmor and Doma, I still expect to rank 14 really high. And the locations I've experienced feel like they're full of vibrancy and life. I feel the ruthless capitalism of Ulda's culture as much as I feel the more ethereal Gridania. It's such a well-crafted world, and the fact that the devs were able to salvage the dumpster fire of 1.0 is a testament to top-tier worldcraft. They made the impossible work, and that's truly incredible. It's certainly worthy of the number 3 spot.
Yeah, and honestly, I still feel I'm feeling good about these rankings. So I'm shocked that I was able to suss this out because I did a podcast years ago where I did a ranking of all the Final Fantasy games, and I hadn't played 14 and 11. I had to guess where I would rank them, and I guessed towards the bottom. And I think that is, that was a bad guess. But this was based upon playing all of 11 and just around Born of 14, and I was able to suss out the games way better, it seems. And so I might flop 11 and 14 when I'm done with everything. But right now, I think I like 11's World a little bit more. But also, I haven't done Shadowbringers yet. And I know we're going into, goddamn outer space and Endwalker. So, and like once we're on the goddamn moon, like that's gonna be so dope that like I think that will probably make sure it remains at least in the number 3 spot. The only ones I put above it were 7 and 10. So yeah, dope as hell world, Final Fantasy 14. Ooh, this will be a fun one. Ranking based upon the party members / cast.
Hi, Internet.
Let's see, where did it end up? 14 ended up in the number 13 spot. So this was based upon a Realm Reborn, just the base game.
Number 13.
Yeah, because some of these categories were based upon like the entirety of the game, which was basically me assuming the entirety of 14 based upon the stuff I had read and just like, fan reception and vibes basically. And then me having that sense of knowledge of the entirety of 11. But some categories where it's like, okay, I'm ranking the cast. There was no way for me to assess the cast of the entirety of Final Fantasy 14. Like I could attest like the vibes of the entire world, but with individual cast members, there's no way to do that without actually playing through all the expansions. So I couldn't know how great Astinian was without playing through Heaven's Word. But I could have a vibe of like how cool Doma is just from like, descriptions and pictures and stuff. So this is ranking based upon the A Realm Reborn cast.
Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Like Final Fantasy XI, Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have traditional party members like in other Final Fantasy games, and instead relies on you teaming up with other players. You once again play as a player-created character, and like 11, you play an up-and-coming adventurer looking to make a name for yourself. However, unlike 11, you're also the Warrior of Light, and the NPCs who act in the role of party members are given much more characterization and much more active roles in the plot of the base game than Lion or Zaid. In A Realm Reborn, the player character works with an organization known as the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. Depending on which nation you start in depends on which of these members will get the most screen time in A Realm Reborn. If you start in Ul'dah, Thancred will be the Scion you interact with the most often. If you start in Gridania, you'll see a lot more of Ida and Papalymo. If Limsa Lominsa is your starting location, you'll end up seeing more of Y'shtola. Once you get to a certain point in the game, you'll see them a bit more evenly alongside the leader Minfilia and other members like Alphinaud. While none of them are particularly great in base 14, except for possibly Thancred, the characters have a decent amount of screen time to allow you to get more attached to them than the cast in previous games. They feel more like active allies joining you on adventure than the passerby party members in base 11. I've heard that the bonding with these characters grows greatly in later expansions, and that a number of players have fallen in love with Y'shtola. I haven't gotten to those parts yet, but she's fine in A Realm Reborn.
So when I say previous games, I don't mean previous games in the series, I mean previous games in the ranking. So when I say, oh, you get more attached to them than characters in the previous games, I don't mean the other 13 previous Final Fantasies. And I still haven't necessarily fallen in love with Y'shtola. I do like her a lot. The characters obviously do grow on you a lot in the expansions. I will say you can also add Alphinaud to the good characters based in just ARR that you can get attached to. I'd say Alphinaud and Thancred are the winners. I have not done the Limsa route, played through it in 14, but I have played through Gridania route and the Ul'dah route. And I would say, but I did watch the cutscenes for the Limsa route. And I really like how every route is technically canon. I think that's actually like kind of genius. So like all the different quests that happen in those different routes are canon to the overall story of A Realm Reborn. And just if you didn't start in that city, some other adventurer did those quests. I think that's actually really genius. And I don't ever hear people talk about, but I think that's kind of one of the most mind-blowing things about 14. So, but man, Greg, you're right about everything. Good job, Greg.
Nothing special, at least at this point in the narrative. Like 11, 14 gets the same handicap of only ranking the base game to make it a fairer fight with the other titles. And because I wanted to get these videos done before 16 comes out because I can't afford a PS5 and probably won't play 16 for a few years. The cast in A Realm Reborn is certainly stronger than those below it on the list, but based only on A Realm Reborn, it's still not a top-tier Final Fantasy cast.
That was a hilarious part of this ranking series, how it became immediately irrelevant after 16 came out. So it got extra hype because people would watch all these videos in anticipation of 16. So like that part of it was cool. But also like the 16 is missing from every one of these videos. So I think there's the pressure to redo this entire series with 16 and all of 15 include. With 16 and with all of 14 included. That would be interesting to see where everything moves around to after I get through Dawn Trail. After I get through, honestly, probably the expansion after Dawn Trail, where 14 lands, where 11 would land, where that would move things, where 16 would land. But yeah, I think based on A Realm Reborn, this is a fair spot for it. I think that's solid characters who get a lot better over time, but based on just like A Realm Reborn and even factoring in 1.0, yeah, I'm okay with that spot. Greg, you were just so right about Final Fantasy XIV, even when you knew nothing about it. Okay, so villains. We're going to the number 13 spot. So this is ranking the
number 13, villain. Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Sorry, MXL fans. I hear he's a great character. When I finally beat the 14 expansions, I may do some informal videos on my thoughts if you guys are interested. But again, this ranking is only looking at the base game, which means A Realm Reborn.
You know, so that is hilarious. Me thinking like, yeah, maybe after I beat all of 14, I'll do like a couple videos talking about my thoughts on the game. Meanwhile, I've been doing like, 40-minute vlogs every week. It's extensively detailing my playthroughs of the game. That sounds like a lot less work what I thought I'd be doing back then. But I also think this is going to be hilarious in a few months where I see Emmett Selk and he probably blows my mind as being a great character. And I'm going to be like, Greg, you were such an asshole for just writing off Emmett Selk here. Like, yeah, he's probably a good character. Like, I that's going to be so funny when that happens. Oh my goodness.
The main villain in A Realm Reborn is arguably Gaius, who has a very cool design, very cool voice, and very generic personality. You see enough of him where he feels like a credible threat, and he has a level of intimidation about him, but that's about it. He's not that great, at least in A Realm Reborn, but he's a bit more fun to watch than those below him on the list. He certainly has screen presence and steals the scene whenever he's around. While in concept he's less interesting than Xand in the Cloud of Darkness, he has the distinct advantage of being on screen more than once, and is significantly less boring than Vayne and Daisley. I don't have too much to say about him, other than...
am I an asshole for laughing at my own jokes? But the line, the significant advantage of being on screen more than once, because I haven't watched this in a while, that actually did just stab me. You know what? Make art that appeals to you. I made myself laugh. That's just, is that ego or is that actually a good joke? Let me know in the comments below.
And that he's a serviceable villain in 14's base game. Not great, but not out and out bad either. Number 12.
Yeah, I think that's also fair. I do know that Gaius comes back because of spoilers. I don't know when, but I'm looking forward to seeing how he re-enters the story because I did like Gaius and I felt there was some depth to him that we didn't get to fully explore that I would like to see more of. And that was me checking that the recording was still going because paranoia. All right, let's see what's next. Oh, ranking by art design. Where did I put 14 in this category? 2, 3, 11. Right above 11.
Number 11, Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV is a visually beautiful game. The locales are absolutely gorgeous to look at. It's one of the prettiest MMOs ever created. However, as nice as the game looks, remnants of 14 1.0 are still very much a part of the general visual aesthetic of this game. The art design of 14 2.0 had to share a lot of visual cues from 1.0 in terms of world and character design. 14 1.0 was considered to have high graphical fidelity, but in terms of general visual presentation, was focused too much on minute details rather than a distinct design style. The result was what felt like in many ways just like a redo of 11 in the same way 5 redid much of 3. Except one could argue the changes to the character races made them less charming and appealing than what came before. The big thing original 14 lacked was a sense of charm, coming off as bland. Not quite as bland as 12, mind you, but leaning more on that end of the spectrum than the vibrancy of
I'm so mean to 12, oh my god.
other entries. And thus A Realm Reborn, needing to continue a lot of the same visual direction as 1.0 so as not to make the transition too jarring, was binded into a certain style. Yoshi P may have upended the world in terms of lore and the layout of the areas, but he couldn't just get rid of the visual aesthetic of the character designs. And while there were subtle changes to the art style to make it more appealing, it was built from a weaker foundation in the first place. Beyond all that though, I do find 14 to have easily the most ugly and cluttered UI in the series. And the chaos of a mass amount of spells and special moves going off on screen at once is generally unappealing to me, as the overblown nature of it leads to it looking messy rather than cool. There are some genuine flaws with the art direction in my book. That's not to say the art design in A Realm Reborn or 1.0 is necessarily weak as a whole, but rather it's lacking as much personality and uniqueness of other entries, at least in the early stages of the game. But I honestly really like the art style and find it to be generally pleasing. It's just that I think other entries offered either something more distinct or something more interesting. A Realm Reborn is a nice middle-of-the-road Final Fantasy in terms of art direction.
You know, I think this is a trickier one because I do genuinely really like the art style of Final Fantasy XIV. And I think my problem with it back then was that it really felt like an amalgamation of all the series art styles and sort of like a weird combination of like something with more of a Nomorian edge, but also like combined with 12 and really focus on like the character races of 11 and then just like modifying them slightly. So like the Galka turn into the you know what, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, so I'm not going to say it, but you know what the Galka turned into, and then the Taro turned into the Lalafels. And so I think there, you know, I enjoyed at the time, I think I enjoyed the design of the Taro more than the Lalafels because I like the proportions better of the Taro. And so I think that was like the little changes. It felt like, you know, taking like 11's races as the foundation and then trying to mix it with the art style of 12, but then Nomura up the 12 art style. And so it is like this weird blending of like the entire series up to that point. And I think I felt like it didn't have its own identity because it was so much just like putting everything in a blender. But as 14 has, as I've played through more 14, I think that I think that 14 developed its own style more and more as it went on, and it became more and more distinct. And so this would probably, I would probably rank this higher. I would rank it at least above 6 out of spite, just to annoy the 6 fans. So, all right. Oh, ranked by opening sequences. So this is ranked by this one is ranked based upon A Realm Reborn. But if I were to redo this ranking series, I would still rank it based upon the A Realm Reborn intro because that is the start of 14
Number 8
proper, of 14 today, essentially.
Final Fantasy XIV. Every ending is just another beginning, or so the expression says. While the intro for Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 was just a generic hype trailer for the game, A Realm Reborn's opening cinematic shows the fiery in-game ending of 1.0 in a hyper-stylized and dramatic manner. Final Fantasy XIV, for those who don't know, launched to near universal derision and was hated by critics and fans alike. The solution the devs came up with was unheard of, remaking the game from the ground up. In order for the remake to make narrative sense, with the terrain of locations changing drastically between versions of the game, the devs came up with an in-game story event where the literal apocalypse rained down fire and brimstone upon the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Players who were active at the time could play through the event, but for the rest of us, we got this cool cutscene showing the events of that epic final battle, and the heroes of that era being teleported 5 years into the future after the conflict to help protect the realm again. Visually, the cinematic is absolutely stunning. The music is fantastic. It does a good job of showing the intensity of that moment, giving it a big sense of dramatic weight and importance. The opening also shows the different parties of major characters involved, and it immediately makes the player want to know who all these people are, what their role in this conflict was, and where they are today. The cutscene helps paint the original 14 and its events almost as legend and myth, the kind of story you hear whispers about but could never experience yourself, and you want to see how this legend affects the modern day. It's an incredible hook and creative use of a bad situation. A Realm Reborn's intro sequence is a fantastic beginning to Final Fantasy XIV in the current day. It showcases incredible storytelling creativity alongside some of the most stunning visuals ever produced for a video game. It's truly something special.
I mean, hey, when bro is cooking, bro is cooking. I got nothing to say past Greg. You nailed it. Yeah, just like correct take, Greg. Correct take.
Hi, Internet. Welcome to the Gradtroin YouTube.
Hello, Internet. All right, let's see. So this is ranking based upon endings. So ranked upon a Realm Reborn's ending. We got the number 11 spot. So it beat 12, 1, 5, 6, 3. Yeah, so right above Final Fantasy III's ending. Let's check out a Realm Reborn's ending and how I felt about it a couple years ago.
Number 11, Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, basically has an action hero ending. You, the Warrior of Light, piloting Magitech armor, run away from an explosion while the main theme of the Final Fantasy series plays in the background. Look, my favorite actor is Sylvester Stallone. I love cheesy 80s action movies, and thus running away from an explosion while swelling music plays speaks to my primal caveman brain.
So the thing is, I still love Sylvester Stallone as an artist, but I'm extremely disappointed by him accepting the Kennedy Center Award from President Trump. I thought that was very shameful. I know that his brother is like a big MAGA guy, and I know that Sly has always been, a Republican and right leaning, but he has never been like he's never gone like full fascist, and that was very disappointing to see him going that route. And obviously, if you look at the politics of his films, I think there's actually a lot of confusion in them. Where I think that Rocky 1 is actually like a bit of a left wing view on like politics and class that he doesn't fully understand is a left wing view of politics and class. But then like Cobra is like the most ridiculous propaganda in the world. But that's part of the charm, is like how ridiculous it is. But his politics were always like not good, but not like, toxic democracy ending either. And but it also, I think it isn't even as bad of a pivot as like the KISS guys who went there, because I remember Paul Stanley actively criticized January 6th as being like treason against the country. But I think he was so desperate for acceptance and validation and a fancy award that he was willing to throw away his principles for that. And so that was extremely disappointing. So yeah, KISS and Sylvester Stallone getting an award from the president. Like teenage Greg would have thought that was awesome until teenage Greg found out that the president was a fascist. So that's a bit of a bummer. Still love, Stallone movies. Still think he is a very talented writer. But I think that, people who make art that you enjoy can still very much disappoint you. And he very much disappointed me with that.
It's really damn cool to see the player character escape just in the nick of time with a massive explosion behind them. A Realm Reborn is actually one of the darker Final Fantasy journeys, but the ending is overly triumphant and joyous. Thancred is saved. The Three Nations are saved. Everybody's ready to celebrate and party, which, as a lover of 80s hair metal, I also appreciate.
And I love 80s hair metal, but it is very weird to me how many dudes who like dressed up as chicks, or like, not dressed up as chicks, but like wore like a lot of like makeup and heels and teased up hair and whatever, and women's clothing. And how many of them are like transphobic? It's so stupid. It's so goddamn stupid. Oh my goodness. I think part of it is that they were just stealing the look of 70s glam acts from England, and they didn't understand the cultural context. They just thought it looked cool. And they're like, oh, David Bowie's cool, so I'll just dress like David Bowie. Like, not understanding like the revolutionary, like breaking down of gender norms that glam rock was doing, and how it was kind of like a troll upon society. Like they just went totally past and just like, yeah, rock and roll, cool, and like didn't understand the extra layer behind it. So, but glam metal, still kick-ass music. This ending still great, and A Realm Reborn still maybe the darkest part of 14. Like, Heaven's Word is somber, But I think when when a Reborn gets dark, it gets really dark. And so I think, like, weirdly enough, Stormblood, the one that's all about like the one that's all about a goddamn war, is that, all about, like, a revolution, is the least dark expansion thus far in 14, at least in my opinion. Let me know what you think. Rank the 14 expansions based upon how dark you think the narrative is.
It is officially the end of a dark era and the beginning of a bright new era, which also serves as a brilliant metaphor for the game itself. I'm more mixed on A Realm Reborn than a lot of folks in the Final Fantasy community, but I do think the ending is really great. And for me to like it as much as I did after a disappointing final boss battle really shows the strength of this ending. It's a bombastic, feel-good ending that puts a big smile on your face.
I mean, yeah, it's a dope ending. It's a really good ending. You can't really complain about the A Realm Reborn ending. It is very solid. All right, what is next? Oh, ranking based upon side content. 14 actually won this. It went straight to the top with number 1.
Number 1, Final Fantasy XIV. Look, I love Final Fantasy XI, but a lot of 11's side content is really, really grindy and really, really hard.
This is so true.
And a lot of it isn't all that fun. It can lead to some cool stuff in the story and some cool gear, sure, but the process for getting to some of those rewards can be a bit of a chore. Final Fantasy XI is, for the most part, meant for really hardcore players. I'm not a hardcore player, and it's actually kind of weird I like 11 as much as I do, but my point is the intense grind and difficulty is not for everyone. 14's content, on the other hand, is for everyone. 14.
Now, it's not to say that 14 doesn't have, like, super grindy content and super difficult content, but there's so much content that has a very low barrier to entry that is more enjoyable immediately than 11's content. A lot of 11 content is delayed gratification. A lot of 14 content is instant dopamine hit, where there's, like, so many side stories, so many raids, the expansions, just all this stuff. Like, it is, because I'm considering expansions to be side content. And what's funny about this is that I put this Hildebrand footage in the video before I played the Hildebrand questline, and just assumed the Hildebrand questline was good based on everything I heard about it, and, like, tried not to read the dialogue so I wouldn't get spoiled for myself on this. Even though I generally avoid spoilers, I'm just like, I don't really understand the context here, but this looks like it's a good scene. So yeah.
It offers side content that's both great for casual players and the most hardcore of the hardcore. And like 11, there's a ton of stuff to dive into. The Gold Saucer from Final Fantasy VII has returned, and it's full of minigames, including Final Fantasy VIII's Triple Triad. 14, like 11, has plenty of expansions and side quests. Both games have crafting, gear customization, and house customization, but 14 makes most of it more accessible, aside from the housing. And the process is a lot more fun and streamlined than 11's. There are tons of job classes you can try, and people love logging in for their daily roulettes to get good EXP, gil, and item rewards. It's an MMO with constant updates, so it has an unfair advantage against the single-player games, but that's specifically what MMOs are designed for. 14 ultimately edges out 11 because the side content is more fun for a general audience and doesn't have the layers of frustration a lot of 11's content does.
Yeah, so for some categories, I made sure to rank the games based upon the entirety of them. So, like, for side content, it would feel unfair to rank it based upon just the base game, because that's the point of an MMO, is, like, how much shit you can put into the game. So this is a category I'm like, okay, all of 14 is considered and all of 11 is considered. And of course, in the categories where all of the 11 is considered and all of 14 is considered, they kind of clean house. So 11 came number 2, 14 came number 1. And I think this is still fair. In terms of side content, the only game I've really heard that maybe competes with it is maybe 7 Rebirth, which I haven't played, but people love the side content in that. So, like, other than 7 Rebirth, I think 14 is a pretty easy winner for this category.
And thus, Final Fantasy XIV wins this ranking for best side content. And
I do consider the expansions to be quote-unquote side content, because they're DLC sequels. So, yeah, that's part of, like, what it makes the unfair advantage. But you know what? Like, that's the advantage of an MMO. That's why you make an MMO, is for stuff like that. So that's I think it's fair.
The Final Fantasy series. Thanks for watching this video. Again, these lists are my personal opinion, and I'm definitely curious to see you guys posting your rankings in the
I don't know what this place is. I'm closing my eyes.
Comments below. Be sure to do the YouTube things, the liking, the subscribing, etc. And if you like this video, don't forget to check out the other rankings in the series. Thanks for watching, and I hope you find peace and happiness in your life. Cheers!
All right, so let's see. We're going to move on to expanded universe content, which means ranking based upon spin-offs and sequels and extra content, so like books and stuff too. So basically, because I treat expansions like sequels, they count as expanded universe content. And spoilers, 14 won this category as well.
Number 1, Final Fantasy XIV. Basically everything I said about 11 applies here. No other game in the series builds upon its world through additional content as brilliantly as Final Fantasy XIV does, and you will regularly hear fans of the series say that 14, when taken as a whole, is the best Final Fantasy game, because no other game in the series can compete with its narrative scope and how it keeps building upon itself. Even 14's bad content, like the original 1.0 version, makes the game better. What was once a bad video game became a legend and myth, the kind of thing you want to seek out on YouTube to get even more story for the world of 14. 14, more than 11, is really good at adding stuff from other games in the series, offers sprinklings of fan service to further enhance their massive and progressive build of its world. So, not only does the world and story get better and better, building into arguably the grandest narrative in the series, and continuing to improve upon itself, it also has so many fun Easter eggs from other games that it almost acts as a culmination of the entire series. 9 does this excellently as well, but 9 doesn't have sequels, whereas 14's expansion sequels get better and better, at least according to fans. I've yet to play them all myself, because I wanted to get this video series out before 16, and according to the Word doc of the script for this series, these videos, in text form, are the length of a decent-sized fantasy novel.
Yeah, that was 10 hours of video essays making all these. That was a lot of video essay. And to release them, one per day was like kind of insanity, but also good for the algorithm. But yeah, thus far, 14 has gotten better and better with each expansion. So it'd be really hilarious if, because I'm recording this before I've started, any of the post Stormblood content, it'd be hilarious if I played Shadowbringers and thought it sucked and was the worst 14 expansion. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be hilarious if that was the one that broke the streak. I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm probably going to love it. I think it's probably going to be my favorite one. But yeah, 14 has gotten better and better. For this ranking, I don't know if things will switch between it and 11, because I put this based upon the assumption of the promise of 14 and my vibes. But it's possible after I play through all of 14, I might go, you know what, 11 is still better. But I think that where 14 stands now, it has a very legitimate fighting chance to legitimately take this number 1 spot based upon experience and not just based upon vibes.
So it's still possible that I might put 11 at the top of this list when all is said and done, but based on everything I've heard and read about 14, and from what I've experienced, it seems to have the best expanded universe of content, and is worthy of the number 1 spot on this list. Thanks for watching this video. Again,
I am so ready for just the anti-oligarchy Shadowbringers. That's, just put it in my veins.
These lists are my personal opinion, and I'm definitely curious to see you guys posting your rankings in the comments below. Be sure to do the YouTube things, the liking, the subscribing, etc. And if you like this video, don't forget to check out the other rankings in the series. Thanks for watching, and I hope you find peace and happiness in your life. Cheers!
All right. Let's move on to the next one. So many rankings. Oh, yeah, that was the ranking series update. So that was the sad update where I said, hey, the rest of the videos are going to come out later because my house flooded and my cat died. Oh, that was sad. That was all kinds of sad. But yeah, as I was making the videos, I got a decent number of them done in advance, but there was a certain point where I was still editing while I was doing the one per day, just because of how long it took to do. And during that process, the house ended up flooding, and that delayed things by quite a bit, obviously, dealing with the flooding. And then, a few weeks later, one of my cats ended up passing away, which was really sad. And so basically just all of that was crippling and just made me stop the series for a week or so. And while I just caught my breath And then I release the rest of them like one day after another. Because the goal is to have them released all before 16. And a few of them I think came out after 16 had come out. But I still, finished the series and still want to do like the one per day and not just like, release like one per week or whatever. So, because I mean, doing like a video essay every week, that would be insane, right? But yeah, rest in peace, Shadow. You are an amazing kitty. Rest in peace, Muffin. Also, amazing kitties. Love my kitties. Okay, so this is ranked based upon the main character of the game. And so 14 ranks, third from the bottom. Let's see what I said about the main character of Final Fantasy XIV.
XI does in terms of...
It's going to be a lot better if it's unmuted. So let's see what I said about that. And actually, hold on, paranoia. I want to check something. If I am muted, it still records. Thank goodness. Mute. Unmute. Cool. Okay. Back to this.
14. Final Fantasy XIV does basically everything Final Fantasy XI does in terms of characterization, but better. For starters, there's far more customization in terms of appearance. In addition, your character in 14 has far greater story significance than your character in 11, who is still a really important figure in the world of 11, but just one of many important figures. In Final Fantasy XIV, however, you are the most main character to have ever main charactered. You are the single most important person in the history of 14's world, by a wide margin. You are the chosen hero of light. In 11, you're not the chosen one, just a really competent mercenary who happens to get involved in world-shattering events. In 14, you're the chosen hero of destiny. A lot of people say the big appeal of 14 is that you really feel like the warrior of light, and it's fun to play as yourself in a Final Fantasy game. So they make characters that look similar to themselves in real life, and some even use their real-life names as their character names. This was the approach I took when playing 14, to see what the experience would be like. It was certainly amusing and definitely interesting to see myself act as the hero in a Final Fantasy adventure. No, not that Final Fantasy adventure. In real life, I got into a lot of fistfights as a kid, so seeing myself act as a shonen anime brawler is something that feels natural and right. That said, I actually like playing as Leito more than Gred Troyan, and would rank myself lower than Leito in terms of main characters, but that may be because I've seen more of Leito's personality develop over having played far more of 11 than 14. Also, in terms of humility, it feels weird ranking myself above other characters on this list. Gred Troyan, better main character than Cloud Strife. Yeah, I'd be doing a comparison like that. So instead, I'm looking at the main character of 14 being another blank slate, like 1 and 11, but offering more agency, a bigger role in the plot, and better customization options. So, in the end, the main character of 14 may rank above the main characters of 1 and 11, but I can't rank it any higher due to the nature of character creation as a dynamic here.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty fair assessment of the Warrior of Light as a character, because a lot of it is your headcanon and how you write them. And it's funny, because I did this video series before I made Leito in 14, and Leito has since become my main. I do like playing as Leito way more than playing as Gred Troyan. Maybe part of it's Red Mage. Maybe it's because I just like Leito's design and the roleplay aspect. And don't get me wrong, I can roleplay myself and turn myself into a character fine. I mean, that's kind of what Lipstick did, where the Lipstick Greg was sort of like a more like aloof agent of chaos, like chaotic good kind of character, where just like whimsically like traveling through time and just like destroying timelines over, very silly whims. So, but yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And you know what? We're going to do something weird here. We're going to watch the 11 segment because Leito is the main character of Greg's 14 adventures at this point. So we should watch the Leito segment just to be fair.
Number 15, Final Fantasy XI. Similar to Final Fantasy I, in Final Fantasy XI your character is a blank slate, but you get more agency in customizing their appearance through gender, race, hairstyle, facial features, and wardrobe. Your character in 11 is actually able to emote, have dialogue choices, and communicate with other players in the world, so your character in 11 does have some semblance of a personality, unlike in 1. There can be a bit of a disconnect in your personality, acting one way in a cutscene, and acting completely different when playing in a party with friends. But if you're like me and just acting like a shonen anime character all the time, you might find some tonal consistency for your avatar. 11, through its systems, allows for more fun headcanon than 1. Your character has a house, friends, accomplishments, rivals, and so much more. With the plethora of expansion content, you can watch your character grow from a run-of-the-mill mercenary to a legendary hero who still maintains a down-to-earth friendly disposition. You can write the story for your character based on how you play. My character, Lito, is friendly, optimistic, and always willing to help others, though he finds that his eagerness to help often gets him into sticky situations. He started off his adventuring journey by moving to Bastock, and after some time in Sandoria, he ultimately settled on a house in Winders. Granted, he spends more time renting rooms in Juneau and Adulan, and probably hangs around more on his private beach off the Adulan coast than the peaceful forest city of Winders. But it's the place he ultimately chose to call home, because his house in Winders came with a fountain, and paying the immigration fee again is annoying. Lito is also a time traveler who has defeated different lords of the underworld and saved all of living existence numerous times. He's also very polite when asking for help. That's Lito. Final Fantasy XI's main character is what you make it, more so than 1, but because Final Fantasy XI's character isn't actually a defined character, I don't feel justified in ranking main character of 11 any higher on this list, even if I've become quite partial to Lito over time.
Yeah, Lito's great. If you love Lito in the let me know in the comments. Say Lito is great in the comments. The real ones will say Lito is great in the comments. Okay, now we're going to do ranked based upon level progression systems. Well, how did I feel about 14's level progression system based on only being a Realm Reborn? Wow, that is a long segment on 11. Above 15. So let's see how I felt about its level progression system.
Number 10, Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV offers minimal grinding in comparison to a lot of other games in the series. While it's similar to 11 in that it focuses on job levels instead of character levels, you gain basically all the experience you need from doing main story quests and daily dungeons, largely eliminating the need for grinding away EXP on random monsters. It's very convenient not to need to grind and just casually go through the main story, though some of the tedium of the story itself can make the overall experience feel like a grind. If you want some extra experience outside of the MSQ, there are the daily dungeons, but those can be a bit annoying if you're on time constraints and just want to do some quick leveling for a few minutes. When waiting to be automatically matched for a party in your daily roulettes, you can be waiting upwards of 20 minutes just to enter a dungeon. You're really at the mercy of the game being an MMO when it comes to leveling, unlike 11, where more of the leveling is within player control. In 11, if you want to hit up the good grinding spots, you can just go there. There's no need to wait 20 minutes. Still, it's not all bad. There are specific questlines for each job that offer experience and new abilities, and the quality of the storytelling is on par with anything in A Realm Reborn. The questlines really help add a unique flavor to your job of choice and enhances the overall experience. 14's leveling system is a mixed bag, but the fact that the MSQ EXP is so generous helps me rank it this high because it does essentially eliminate the need for grinding to a large extent. And if you do need to grind, the amount you get from daily dungeons is generally worthwhile and more engaging than just destroying hordes of random enemies. However, the wait for the dailies and lack of player control prevents me from ranking 14 any higher in this category.
I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment, TBH. Yeah, I don't really have any issues with past Greg's assessment there. Yeah, I feel good about that. All right, let's this is where I rank it. This is my ranking of the
which was far more successful
games. So my ranking of overall ranking as to how I feel about the different games in the series based upon just the base game of 11 and the base game of Realm Reborn. So the 15 mainline games that were out and a Realm Reborn ranked at the bottom below 12. So let's see why Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn is the worst mainline Final Fantasy game according to Past Greg.
Number 16, Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. I don't dislike any mainline Final Fantasy game. It's easily my favorite video game series of all time, and I have a lot of affection for all of these games, even if I'm willing to criticize them. However, if I had to pick a least favorite, then A Realm Reborn would be my last place pick. I do think that A Realm Reborn is a triumph in many ways, especially the writing. The team was given a monumental task, to create a story that served both as a sequel to a failed game with poor reception, and also a soft reboot of that same story. They had to repeat enough story beats without it feeling like a repeat, securing a new legacy for Final Fantasy XIV, and getting a rare chance at a do-over that also had to acknowledge the previous story's failures. It's an incredible accomplishment that the team was able to pull it off, but it also doesn't change the fact that playing through A Realm Reborn is often very boring and bogged down by a lot of filler. There are a lot of fetch quests in 14 that feel more like they're part of a video game than part of a coherent narrative, which generally isn't the case for Final Fantasy games. They generally feel more like stories told through the video game medium, but so much of 14's story feels like, this is here because this is an MMO, and this is how MMOs function, rather than, this is the best artistic choice for telling this story.
I think that is a very valid criticism of A Realm Reborn and how, like, grindy and fetch quest the MSQ is. I think that is grindy in terms of, like, how, like, tedious it is, and even as they've cut down on A Realm Reborn to streamline it, I still think that is a valid take on A Realm Reborn in terms of, like, the narrative that it tells.
The cast of characters is one of the more lackluster ones in the series, at least in A Realm Reborn. The Scions aren't bad characters per se, but there isn't enough development for them in the initial game for me to grow overly attached to them. I also really don't like the forced instances that are required to continue the story. While playing through them is fine, I don't like the wait times required to progress the story, as it feels like I have no control over how I play the game, and I'm at the mercy of other players' availabilities. In 11 there are forced waits that can last up to 24 hours, but for some reason, I find them less egregious, mainly because there's often a story reason for the waits. Like a character saying, give me time to repair this for you, and because the waits usually come after completing a significant portion of the story where it feels good to take a break for a night, and they're also fairly infrequent. In 14, you might get a big cutscene and then it's like, please wait for other players before you can continue the story beat we just set up. It's a big momentum killer, and it happens constantly.
Now, this has been resolved a lot with the NPCs, the NPC parties you can do in dungeons now, which were added to later expansions first and then added to A Realm Reborn after this video series. So that does make a pretty huge difference of not having to wait for parties based upon whenever you happen to be playing. So that is a giant game changer that I think would adjust this ranking pretty heavily. But this, when I was first playing through A Realm Reborn, it was a constant brick wall of just boom, story beat, you're ready to do this dungeon, and then just like some of the waits were just so long. This was me just doing like an example duty finder, and it said 7 minutes, but there were times I was waiting like 30, 40 minutes for a party to do like A Realm Reborn dungeons, and it was really bad. So I do think at the time this criticism was valid. I would have a very different opinion now based upon what I played and also the state of A Realm Reborn currently. But I think this was a valid take at the time.
I like to play at my own pace, and 14 often does not let you do that. I also had a really lackluster final boss encounter in this game. I ended up getting lost at one point because I didn't understand the mechanics, missing a big phase of the final boss battle, and when I warped to the battlefield I got knocked out pretty quickly, but I still got the cutscenes. So, I missed out on actually playing through the final bosses, and me beating the game was just waiting for other players to finish the fight. Yes, you could criticize me and say, just get good, but with so much chaos flashing across the screen, it's hard to read the messages instructing you what to do for specific mechanics introduced for the first time in a new dungeon, which I find to be another flaw of the game. The user interface in 14 is easily my least favorite in the series, where even with customization I always find it to be ugly, clunky, and unintuitive. I really like just hanging out in 14's world. It's fun to just log in and soak up the scenery and seasonal events, and I'm very much looking forward to playing through the rest of the expansions. At the time of this video, I've only been A Realm Reborn because, again, I wanted to get this series out before 16 comes out, and I have other games on my list I'm currently playing above Final Fantasy XIV, like Another Eden, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, and Final Fantasy Dimensions 1 and 2. I like Final Fantasy XIV, but the weaker story, weaker cast, terrible UI, lots of filler, and a lot of unsatisfying gameplay makes it an easy last place for me. Many people say that through its expansions, Final Fantasy XIV becomes the best Final Fantasy game. That may be true, but if it's the best Final Fantasy game, you need to play through the worst Final Fantasy game to get to it.
Savage. So if I was to do this ranking again based upon playing through Heavensward and Stormblood, I'm not considering, so 11, if I was doing 11, all of the games, like all of the expansions, it would rank just below Final Fantasy X in the number 6 spot. Because I don't know where I'd put 16. But I would say at this point, I like 14 more than 12 easily. More than 1 easily. More than 5 easily. More than 6 easily. I'd say more than 3. More than 2. Yeah, more than 2. And then against 15, I would say, yeah, I'm going to give it the edge over 15. But then against 13, I might still like 13 more at this point. So it moves up pretty significantly from last place to uh, to 8th place. So it does leapfrog quite a bit. So yeah, it does move pretty significantly around, but yeah, I think that 14 gets a lot better in the expansions. What a hot take! But is A Realm Reborn the worst Final Fantasy game by itself? Yeah, and it might still be. If you're looking at just A Realm Reborn, 12 might be better than A Realm Reborn. I'd have to sit with that for a bit, but I think that is still possible. That A Realm Reborn might be the worst mainline Final Fantasy game. All right, let's move to the ranking of the games based upon fan reception, which is basically very similar to how I seeded them in that tournament on my Discord. But let's watch the number 4's spot for Final Fantasy XIV. Once it loads, I believe in you. I believe in you, Final Fantasy.
Overall, the community is pretty united in their praise of this one. Number 4, Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV fans are basically in a cult. They are probably the most rabid fan base in the fandom, but they're not rabid in a negative way. Instead, they're just overwhelmingly enthusiastic and joyful in their preaching of 14's greatness, and there are a lot of them. Final Fantasy XIV is one of the great success stories in the series. After the abysmal launch of the 1.0 version of the game, 14 was rebuilt from the ground up and went from being an absolute failure to legitimate competition for dethroning World of Warcraft in the MMO market.
So a quick note, because Final Fantasy X was ranked below this. This is ranked upon the fan reception in terms of like the Final Fantasy fan base, not factored in sales figures and critical reception like I did in that tournament. And so there's more people who hate on 10 and people who hate on other games. So I was factoring in the haters also with the ranking of fan reception. But 14, it gets a lot of love and a lot of it is deserved.
It was praised not only as a great MMO, but a great Final Fantasy game with a great story, and each expansion has been extremely well received, continually building the game into a grander and grander narrative. There are tons of fans who consider this game to be the best game of the series because of how much story there is and how high quality said story is. The sentiment is continuing to grow by the day, and it's not uncommon to see people regularly argue that 14 is the best Final Fantasy. I think the ease of access is a strong part of 14's success. Unlike 11, which has a very complicated startup process, 14 is a modern game that's fairly easy to play pretty immediately, and it has an extremely generous free trial that allows completion of A Realm Reborn and the award-winning expansion Heavensward with no restrictions on playtime.
And Stormblood.
This, plus the strong word of mouth, I think led to more people giving it a shot than 11, and it's very common to hear that Final Fantasy fans have at least dabbled in 14, even if they didn't love it or keep playing. The free trial of 14, combined with its strong word of mouth, has led to a lot of players giving the game a shot. 14 has tons of story and tons of content, and it continues to build upon itself in ways that offline entries can't. For this reason, 14 fans feel that the stories of previous games can't even come close in scope, and rank 14 as an easy first place. But, on the flip side, a lot of Final Fantasy fans refuse to play the game simply because it's an MMO, and they continue to write off the genre, same as they did back with 11. There are a lot of fans deeply skeptical of 14 for this reason, and despite its high praise and popularity, it still isn't able to shake off this stigma with a lot of members of the community. And even 14 fans will generally admit that A Realm Reborn, the base game, is pretty weak, and if the first 50 hours of your Final Fantasy game is pretty weak, that's a big ding against it.
I mean, that is pretty fair. That is, like, guys, you just got to play through, like, the first 100 hours, and then it's great. Just trust me, guys.
Still, in spite of these issues, 14 has generally become beloved by the Final Fantasy community and is commonly considered to be among the very best of the franchise, if not the very best.
Yeah, good segment pass, Greg. Very solid analysis of how the community generally views Final Fantasy XIV. So this next one is sort of an epilogue video I did for the ranking series, where basically I just go into personal stories about each game and where I was at in my life when I beat them for the first time. So let's check out the 14 segment. It's just me going through the games in the order that I beat them, and then like personal anecdotes of like, this is what I was doing in my life.
Number 14, Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Similar to many games in the wife era of my RPG playing, we were looking for another game to play together, and I was looking at the list of games we had available to us. Final Fantasy XIV, boasting both a free trial and having 3D graphics, made it a strong contender. My brick of a laptop was actually able to run 14 on low settings, and the game functioned fine, without any lag, which impressed me quite a bit that the devs could optimize the game in such a way where it could run on an array of PCs with vastly different amounts of processing power. My wife is not a fan of doing battles in RPGs, so rather than both of us making a character and doing the traditional multiplayer one would expect from 14, we instead created a single character together. And by we, I mean I let her have total control over the character we created together. So, after creating our character, we started up the game and had no idea what to do. The UI was ugly, all over the screen, and confusing. We like to play using controllers, not keyboards, and the button layout of the controller felt unintuitive. The text was tiny and difficult for us to read, which was a pain given that we like to play our games on our television set and sit back on the couch. We tried a few things like increasing the font size, but the weirdness of the controls and how different it was from anything else we played made my wife give up on the game pretty quickly in our initial play session. Since I was nearing completion of all the mainline Final Fantasy games, and because the game was free, I decided to go ahead and play it a bit longer. After all, the game had extremely high praise, and the only thing it would cost me was my time. So I went ahead and made a new character, since I heard a big appeal of the game was playing as yourself, and played through the game. While I liked parts of it, there were things that constantly annoyed me, like the UI and duties. The story was a bit darker than I expected, but still felt average in terms of the series. It wasn't a bad story, but it wasn't a great one either. It was fine, but the tedious gameplay loop of MMOs that crept into the game I found very unappealing. I didn't leave 14 with the best impression, but I could finally check it off my list.
Yeah, and then I had to make the decision, do I play the rest of 14 or do I play 11? And then I went and played 11, and then after being 11, it was, do I, go back and finish the rest of 14, or do I play the rest of 11? And I liked 11 better, so I played the rest of 11. So I think that if you are mainly someone who plays RPGs and not MMOs, like offline, like turn-based RPG, if you're me basically, and you played a bunch of other Final Fantasy games, 14 is, I think, the hardest one to learn how to play, just because like a cross hotbar MMO is very different than every other game in the series. And I think the other games in the series have a faster learning curve than 14. Like 11 is confusing because like you don't know where to go, and there's a lot of stuff in the menus, but it's organized in a very coherent way. And you can generally figure like press the X button to attack, and then like select from a menu that looks like menus in every other Final Fantasy game you play. Like the battle system, it moves very quickly, but like everything is organized the same way in like every other Final Fantasy you played. Versus this is like, hold down R2 and then press like triangle for your attack, and then press circle for another attack because you have to do them in a very specific order. And then hopefully you add like an item on your hotbar if you haven't gotten a healing spell yet. And that's just like, it's very different. So that would be the end, but there's one little bonus. We're going to be doing the Final Fantasy tier rank because I don't think Just the Gems played 14, so I don't think there's anything in that video. But we're going to see where we ranked the Final Fantasy 14 characters, myself and my buddy Jesse, where we ranked the 14 characters. So let's go back to the beginning of this section.
I think he's better than Gabranth.
Oh, we don't need the chat.
Maybe just trust me, he's better than Gabranth.
All right, let's see where we ranked the 14 characters.
And now we're on to 14, which you haven't played, correct?
No, so I'll just rely on Opera Omnia for that. I do want to say to Caveat Zealot's comment there, the open-toed boots on Fang are silly. They're pretty dumb, actually. So, yeah.
And yet we both like Naruto, so what are we talking about? Okay, Minfilia, is she an Opera Omnia?
No.
I've only been a Realm Reborn. Based on a Realm Reborn only, she is a like low C character. She's basically just like the Nick Fury gathering the Avengers together, but there's not much more to her than that. I find her less interesting than the Yeti, so she ranks below the Yeti for me. Alphino,
I'll take your word. Below the Yeti.
Alphino, is he in Opera Omnia?
Yeah, Alphanod and Alice.
Yeah.
Both of them are in it.
I don't have too strong of opinions on either of them. Alice is barely in a Realm Reborn. Alphino a little bit more, but he doesn't have too strong of a personality. Wherever you want to put them, I'm fine with.
Ooh, this hurts me now because I love both of them at this point, and they're very, very strong characters, and I can't imagine my Final Fantasy heart without them in it. Oh, the pain.
Like both of them in Opera Omnia. Once again, they have that two halves of the same coin sibling thing going on there, which is really nice. I think that their fighting style is actually pretty unique and interesting. I like the little spirit animal. So overall, I feel like they're a B character. I think they're a worse version of Palamimporum, just because they don't have the charm. But I still think they're interesting characters.
All right. Then I will go ahead and stick them in B. I'll put them above Gabranth. I don't know if I want to put them above Pain. How do you feel about that? Above Gabranth, but maybe not above Pain?
I'll take it.
Sid from 14. Is he in Opera Omnia?
He is not.
He is he's a very standard Sid, just like not bad, not great. He is just normal Sid. Just doing normal Sid things. Okay. You know what? I think he has more personality than Galuf, and also he does have amnesia like Galuf. But I think he has more personality, so I would put him I'd put him above Gabranth in B. Like, he's a normal Sid, so like he's not like the most unique Sid, but he's very likable. He's a Sid. He does Sid things, but without like the like abrasive negative aspects. So like, take your favorite Sid and then add in Galuf's amnesia, and that's where you have Sid from 14.
Well, I'll have to trust your word for it. There's only 5 characters from 14 I have exposure to, and I don't think one of them's on this list.
Let's see, Yastola is next on the list. I have to imagine she is in Opera Omnia.
Yeah, she's the poster child of Final Fantasy 14.
I don't really have too strong of an opinion of her from A Realm Reborn. A lot of people love her. I think she's fine based only on A Realm Reborn. Wherever you want to put her, I will not argue, unless it's top of S, in which I'll be like, what are you talking about?
That's totally top F. No, for her, I think what she is what Fran could have been. In terms of character design, character intrigue, I think what they did is they realized that, they needed to take that design a little bit further. So I feel like she's top of C, low B. I don't know enough about her. I only know for Opera Omnia, and she's very pensive always, and what I'd expect out of that trope of a character. So nothing exciting.
You know what? Just based on her reputation, I want to put her above the twins in B, which is still low B. Above.
Thus far, I would put Y'shtola below the twins. I think the twins get really great. Basically, like immediately after Reborn is when they really start to amp up their personalities. Alice, especially in Stormblood, but Alphino, like pretty immediately after Reborn, really steps up. So yeah, and as far as Minfilia down in C, that's a bit tougher because I think Minfilia is more like maybe I'd put her a little bit higher. Maybe I'd put her in B. And Sid, I think, is still just like the most like standard Sid of Sids. He is just a normal Sid. I think that's like a Sid is always a great character, but he is just like the normalest of Sids.
Of Alphino and Alisade, just because everyone seems to like her. And so just because we haven't gotten to that part yet, but I think B seems safe because we do like her, we just don't love her. So let's put her in B.
Sure.
All right. Next we have Thancred. Did you experience him in Opera Omnia?
I did not.
He is basically like the Balthier Edgar type character, except he does fall and have to get back after falling. But I don't think he's as good as either of them. I don't know because it's tough with the ones where you don't have. I think he's better than Gabranth. Maybe just trust me, he's better than Gabranth. Put him in low B, where all these 14 characters ended up.
Yeah, I'll trust you on it.
All right, next we have Ida and Papalimo. They largely come as a pair in A Realm Reborn. Are they in Opera Omnia?
Thancred I might rank a little bit higher than that. I think he does have an interesting journey that he's going on, and I think he's going to get even more interesting in Shadowbringers, is my hunch, based upon how prominent he is in the trailers. So I think Thancred is going to probably level up, in my opinions, pretty soon. And I like him more and more the more I see of him.
Yeah, they both are. And I'll tell you, I like the Papalimo, or however you pronounce his name, better than Ida. I think Ida is boring, design-wise, personality-wise. At least in Opera Omnia, there was nothing there that made me want to say that character was better than a C.
All right. I think she does have interesting stuff in later expansions from the spoilers I've read, but I don't want to argue on that point, so I'll just put her like right below Fran right now. And where do you want to put?
And the spoilers that I'm referencing there is basically just like knowing that she gets to be the main character of her own expansion, essentially. So I'm like, I assume there's character development there. So that's why I've said there's probably more than that. But yeah, I didn't know specific spoilers.
Papalimo.
I like. It's a good. He plays a great foil to Shantotto in Opera Omnia. I really do like the intelligent debates that you have with one another. It's an enjoyable interaction, and because of that interaction, and despite not knowing much about the character, I would go in that low B range.
Low B with all the other 14 characters.
I see potential for that character. I see potential. I rely on you to take it further.
You don't get too much screen time with him in A Realm Reborn, so, but I did like him better than Y'shtola, so I'll just put him above Y'shtola for now, because why not?
I do really feel like Papalimo, of all the Scions, he is the one I wish had gotten more screen time, because I feel like there's more underneath the surface for him that we never really got to see. So yeah, I really wish we got more time with Papalimo.
All right, and that taps me out on 14 characters. Those are the 5 I know.
Yeah, and then we've got a couple from the expansions that I don't know. I think one is from Heaven's Word, and then the other one is, I think, the other one is, you know what, I know who she is, but I'm not going to talk about her because spoilers. But yeah, okay, cool, figure that out.
Yeah, let's do.
Yeah, so that is obviously Estinian, who is a great character, obviously ranks very high. And when I looked at this, I'm like, oh, that's, Ida after she takes off her mask, when I didn't know her name then, but I just knew like, oh, that's her in Heaven's Word. So that's what I'm referencing there.
Something different. Let's do something different. Let's let the live chat give the next 2 placements.
Let's see. I don't even know the name of those. Well, I know who one of them is. The live chat, do you have opinions on these 2 14 characters as to where they should go?
I feel like we've been harsh on 14.
The live chat is hilarious. Like, I'm so sad about your 14 ranking so far. That's the problem, Greg. You only played ARR. Man, I am so scared of your 14 ranking. Lamau. So, sorry, bud. Sorry, cereal guy.
Well, while chat
Cereal
decides,
guy, we're relying on you.
while chat is deciding, because they're not, they haven't decided yet. So the Dragoon dude from Heaven's Word and the spoilerific character from Stormblood. Let us know where you want us to rank them, and we'll put them there whenever we get around to reading those comments. Let's move on to 15, because this has been a long stream. So we only have 2 games left. 2 games left.
Let's see if I can see. Oh, it looks like we decide that pretty quickly after this. All right, I'll leave it going.
So, Noctis. I think he's a great character. I think solid A, or I think S might be a little bit high, but a solid A I think is reasonable for Noctis. I think his arc makes sense. I like his journey that he goes on. I think his emotions and his emotional state throughout the game make a lot of sense. I like his close friendship with his bros. I like his design, and yeah.
Fantasy 15, my favorite for certain. I really like him as a character. I like his fighting style. I like everything he brings to the table.
All right, we got one of them. One of the 14 characters ranked, and they said below the other 14 characters. I assume you're not talking about below Ida, so I'll just put this dude below B. And this character is a spoiler character. I'll just put her below Ida for no reason. And as far as Noctis,
Lamau.
As far as Noctis.
All right, so we have successfully gone through my old Final Fantasy ranking series to see how I felt about A Realm Reborn back in the day and see if my opinions changed. So this was a sort of meta commentary, talking with past Greg, having a conversation with your past self as a special episode of Greg's 14 Adventures. This was something I've kind of thought about doing for a while. But then I realized, oh shoot, I'm going to be like out of town for like a week and a half. And I won't have any time to play 14. And so I will need an episode in the backlog. And so is this a filler episode like in anime where they're just like, oh shoot, we caught up to the manga, we've got to do something? Or is this a special episode? You decide. But you know what? This is a 2-hour bonus episode to make sure that we don't miss a week of Greg's 14 Adventures. I'm going to count this as good hashtag content. So going through my entire A Realm Reborn experience, I think that A Realm Reborn, it's one of the few Final Fantasy games I played twice and beaten twice, or rather that I beaten twice. A lot of Final Fantasy games I played a bunch of times, but I've only beaten them once. Like 6, I played like 20 times. Like started up new save files or whatever, but I only actually gotten to the end in one playthrough. 7, I've beaten maybe 2 or 3 times. 9, I beat it twice. 9, I beaten twice. 10, I beaten twice. 11, because I did play through all 3 different nation routes and beat the Shadow Lord multiple times. So I do count that as beating. So I did play 11, base 11 3 times. But 14, I've actually played through twice from the beginning to the end of A Realm Reborn, which is very rare for me with a video game and with Final Fantasy. And I do like the new version of A Realm Reborn a lot more. I do think it's I do like it a lot more. And I think in terms of like the grand scope of Final Fantasy 14, I appreciate the foundations it built. But the game gets so much better after A Realm Reborn. But I think this was really like a fun nostalgia trip to go through my past opinions on 14, on A Realm Reborn, how I felt about the game then and how I feel about it now. And yeah, this was, hopefully you enjoyed this, this little super cut. Hopefully, it was a pleasant watch. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to do the liking, the commenting. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments on Greg's old 14 opinions. But I think this was a fun little episode. And yeah, I look forward to chatting with you guys in the comments and seeing you next week for another episode of Greg's 14 Adventures. Since this is an episode I'm keeping in the back pocket, I don't know if there's going to be like a normal episode of Greg's 14 Adventures next week or if it's going to be another special event episode. So, but either way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for another video. I hope I did not jinx it by saying that. I hope it's like, no, I don't have another backlog episode, but fingers crossed. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, everyone.